April 8th, 1940, 08:45 hours. The Norwegian Sea, heavy weather, somewhere off Trondheim. HMS Glowworm, a British destroyer of 1,345 tons, is running alone through rough seas after falling behind her squadron the previous night, searching for a man swept overboard. She has four 4.7-inch guns and 10 torpedoes. Closing on her out of the mist is the Admiral Hipper, a German heavy cruiser of over 14,000 tons carrying 8 8-inch guns, more than 10 times Glowworm's displacement, and armed to match. There is no version of a fair fight between these two ships. Glowworm cannot outrun her, cannot outgun her, and has no support within reach. Her captain, Lieutenant Commander Gerard Roope, has already sent the sighting report that will warn the rest of the Royal Navy that a major German force is moving off the Norwegian coast, the first hard evidence of the invasion about to begin. In the next hour, with his ship burning and his guns failing one by one, Roope will make a decision so unusual that the German captain who defeats him will personally write to the British government asking that Roope be given his country's highest award for bravery. This is the story of the first Victoria Cross of the Second World War, recommended not by the Royal Navy, but by the enemy who sank the ship. The encounter began almost by accident. Glowworm was part of the escort assigned to HMS Renown for a mine-laying operation off Norway. But rough weather the previous night had swept a crewman overboard, and Roope broke formation to search for him. A decision that separated Glowworm from the rest of her flotilla by the time dawn came. On the morning of the 8th, while working to rejoin her squadron, she ran into two German destroyers, the Bern von Arnim and the Hans Ludemann, screening ahead of a larger force. Glowworm engaged them directly and scored at least one hit before the German ships broke off and turned north. A maneuver Roope correctly read as an attempt to draw his single destroyer onto something larger waiting behind them. He gave chase anyway, and sent the signal that would prove far more valuable to the Royal Navy than anything his 4 guns could accomplish alone. A confirmed sighting report of German naval movement off the Norwegian coast radioed back to HMS Renown just as the Admiral Hipper came into view, closing fast through the heavy sea. What Roope was looking at should have ended the engagement immediately by any reasonable calculation. The Admiral Hipper displaced roughly 10 times what Glowworm did, carried main guns firing shells nearly 4 times the weight of anything Glowworm could return, and had armor. A destroyer's guns had no realistic chance of penetrating at any range. A single ship duel between a light destroyer and a heavy cruiser of this class was not a fight in any meaningful sense. It was a formality before a sinking. The sea state made the mismatch worse. Heavy swells meant Glowworm couldn't maneuver freely enough to shadow the German force from a safe distance and simply keep reporting its position, which is what standard doctrine called for against a target this dangerous. Roope's own after-action assessment, reconstructed later from survivor accounts, concluded there was no way to disengage cleanly. He decided to attack with everything he had instead of trying to run. Roope opened with a full spread of 5 torpedoes, then his remaining 5, covering the attack behind a smokescreen laid to obscure Glowworm's exact position and bearing. All 10 missed. Admiral Hipper's return fire began finding Glowworm almost immediately once the smoke cleared, an 8-inch shell scoring a hit that started the fires and damage that would ultimately doom the ship. With his torpedoes spent, and his ship taking hits she had no armor to absorb, Roope made the decision that separates this action from almost any other single ship engagement of the war. Rather than continue trading fire, he could not win or attempt a retreat His damaged engines likely couldn't sustain. He ordered Glowworm to close the distance and ram the German cruiser directly amidships. If you're finding this dive into Royal Navy history interesting, subscribing helps the channel keep telling these stories. Under continuing heavy fire, with fires already burning aboard his own ship, Roope steered Glowworm directly into Admiral Hipper's starboard side. The impact tore open a significant section of the cruiser's hull, flooded compartments below her waterline, and forced Hipper to reduce speed for repairs that ultimately kept her out of action for roughly a month. Damage inflicted not by gunnery or torpedoes, but by 1,345 tons of destroyer, driven deliberately into a target more than 10 times her size. The collision was catastrophic for Glowworm herself. Her bow was crushed, her engine room flooded, and the ship that had already been burning before the ramming was now taking on water faster than any crew could manage. Roope gave the order to abandon ship, and by every account from the survivors, spent his final minutes helping his own men into life jackets rather than seeing to his own safety. Petty Officer Walter Scott stayed on the one gun still capable of firing and kept it in action even as the crew abandoned around him, getting off the last shots fired at Hipper before Glowworm went down. Of approximately 149 men aboard, only 31 survived, pulled from the freezing water by boats sent over from the ship that had just sunk them. Roope was not among them. What happened next is close to unique in the history of the award. Admiral Hipper's captain, Helmuth High, personally oversaw the rescue of Glowworm's survivors, and, according to the men he pulled from the water, told them directly that their captain had been an extraordinarily brave man. After the war, working through the Red Cross and British channels, High formally recommended that Roope be awarded the Victoria Cross, providing testimony from the German side of the action to support a decoration. Britain's own military had no surviving officer left to fully witness firsthand. It was the first time in the Second World War that a Victoria Cross citation rested substantially on enemy testimony. Awarded posthumously to Roope in 1945, 5 years after his death. Once his crew's survivor accounts and High's own statement could be brought together to confirm exactly what had happened aboard a ship that very nearly took its own witnesses down with her. The tactical outcome, measured in ships, was a total loss for the Royal Navy. Glowworm was sunk. Admiral Hipper survived and continued her mission delivering German troops to Trondheim as part of the invasion of Norway. But the strategic value of that single sighting report, radioed back before the guns ever opened fire, gave the Admiralty its first hard confirmation that a major German naval force was moving off the Norwegian coast, information that shaped the Royal Navy's response to the invasion in the days that followed. And the manner of the ship's loss, one lightly armed destroyer, choosing to close the range and ram a heavy cruiser rather than simply die at range without inflicting a mark on her, became one of the defining stories of the entire Norwegian campaign, taught for decades afterward as an example of using a doomed situation to inflict maximum cost rather than accepting it passively. Glowworm was never built to fight the Admiral Hipper, and no reasonable plan would have sent her against a ship that outweighed her 10-1. She was built to screen, to scout, to report back and stay out of exactly this kind of engagement. What she did instead was turn the one advantage a smaller, faster ship still has over a larger one, the simple ability to close the distance and hit something with her own hull, into a month of repairs for a cruiser that should never have had to fear a destroyer a fraction of her size. Roope never lived to see the medal his enemy asked Britain to give him. But the captain who sank him made sure the world knew exactly what it had cost him to do it.